Welcome to Beyond the B, an ongoing dialogue about the past, present, and future of the B Corp movement. Co-hosts Emmy Allison and Ryan Honeyman facilitate an open and honest conversation about the B Corp movement, advise companies on how to increase their impact, and provide a deep dive into the new B Corp standards that are shaping our community.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner and worker owner at Lyft Economy, and I'm joined by my colleague and co-host, Emmy Allison. Hey, Emmy.
Hey.
We're back with another mailbag for ourselves. This is a self-mailbag episode where we are going to go through
our own questions.
Yes,
we have questions and we're answering our questions.
And so we're going to go through the 14-step B Corp 2.1 certification process together. And we're going to go through each step and we're going to make it fun for you, dear listener. We're going to make this engaging. We're going to throw in anecdotes and stories. Emmy's going to talk about her childhood.
These are big promises. Big promises.
All right. So let's jump in. Anything to add on that, Emmy? Any framing thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just helpful to know we're looking at one of the slides in this document is called the Certification Process Requirements for B Corp's Summary. And it's like a fun chart that has like yellow and pink and green, different colored bubbles. And yeah, it's a 14-step process, but we're also going to walk through some of the helpful things to know as we go through the process.
Yeah. Fun may be a bit of a stretch, but we'll just say it is here. It is here and it's present for us. And we're going to go into it.
Yeah.
Okay. So in case you haven't been keeping up, which some of you we know have not, this B Lab released a bunch of new updates recently. And these are related to the certification process requirements. And it outlines the essential guidance and instructions on audit, certification, and license requirements that applies to all applicants and certified B Corps. So we're going to go through and try to make this as entertaining as possible. And Emmy and I are going to try and learn from each other. And hopefully you learn something too. So Emmy, why don't we start with step 1? Register your company.
Yeah, that one's kind of boring because a lot of our audience members are already B Corps and already registered. But I do think it's helpful to remember that we were calling it the Impact app, but now we're calling it like B Impact, the B Impact app, and or the B Impact platform.
The beep.
Or the beep.
Or the BIP, depending on how you feel about it. Okay, so, that was easy. Step 1, just register your company, folks. Just go on the platform and literally just put in your company details. What's the problem with that step? No problems. Okay, step 2. Then we have to assess eligibility for certification. So what is this new step, Emmy?
The step 2 and 3 kind of blend together for me. It's like also 3 is identify certification scope, track and eligible brands, and create a risk profile. But from what I understand, I think you can correct me, like step 2 is that the foundation requirements?
Yeah, I think step 2 and honestly, I think, step 2 and 3 are almost combined. You just literally go on, and it's actually really nice. A systems improvement that B Lab created. It used to be sometimes you'd have to ask them like, hey, can you make a determination about whether I'm eligible, blah, blah, blah. And now B Lab has created a little workflow that's all contained within the B Impact app. And it tells you if you're eligible for certification. And just so you know, Emmy, you may have experienced this as well. I was working with a company where the company itself had an owner company, and then the little platform, the B Impact platform, asked, like, is this company willing to change its legal structure? And I think the client had told me, no, it's not. And so what it did is it said, okay, we're going to send, like, it just like sent a message to B Lab Global of like, what do you think about this? And so we haven't received an answer yet, but that's something different than how if you fill it out, like you'll get an approval right away if everything
Yeah.
is clear.
Yeah, I will just say this is a really lovely process improvement because sometimes companies were getting all the way to a review and like even to verification before realizing that they were ineligible for some reason. And so now you find out beforehand, and it's like things like, do you have clients in controversial industries? Do you generate revenue in controversial industries? But also, yeah, what you're speaking to, the complex structure requirements or like the complex structure guidelines is like the impact platform will take you through a scoping process. And if your company is like a little bit more complex, I was going to say than average, but I think honestly most companies are complex. Then yeah, the it gets like sort of elevated, and like another analyst will reach out to you and do the like complete the scoping process.
Yeah, that's a great sort of improvement. Then I think the challenge is companies would pick their own track and just launch into the assessment and get 6 months into the process and then realize, oh, actually we are not on the right track. And so B Lab's really trying to stop that.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
One other thing on step 3 around identifying scope and track is that B Lab up until recently was saying that there's 2 ways to determine the track and sort of certification scope. One was the number of employees you have, and then one was the revenue. And then you were supposed to take the higher of the 2 to determine which track you're on. So say you were like 50 employees, but you had 100 million in revenue, you'd have to do the size, you'd have to do the track associated with the 100 million in revenue. But now B Lab has said, after doing this pilot project with a number of companies and realizing that a lot of companies were going to be pulled into tracks that were more complex and more difficult and and more expensive because the fee for like depends on your company size. They've now decided that it's the lower of revenue or employees. So when you fill out this process, it's already going to be updated in B Impact, but you'll be assessed on the lower of employees or revenue.
Yeah.
So in that same example, where if you had 50 employees and you had 100 million in revenue, instead of being in the large track for that 100 million in revenue, you'd be in the medium track for the being at 50 employees. And so it's going to make it a little more achievable, a little less overwhelming for companies, especially those who, if you only have 50 employees and you're making 100 million in revenue, like, wow, like what kind of product are you selling? So you got a good business. But for those folks on the edge case, it's going to make it a little easier to complete this. Anything to add on that, Emmy?
Yeah, I will just say, like, it still continues to be a little bit of a challenge when you're straddling any of these. I have a client who, like, when we do all the FTE, like, calculations that B Lab, like, uses, they have, like, 10.6 workers. And so we end up having to sort of, like, we're looking at the micro requirements, but we're also keeping our eye on the small requirements. But yeah, I think it's helpful, like a little bit more flexibility as we transition to something that's just like such a huge jump.
Yeah. Okay. So in step 4 is complete the self-assessment. So in old school B Lab parlance, I guess that would just be like fill out the assessment based on your
the
own.
Actual.
Yeah. Fill out the full assessment based on your own understanding of like how you score against the new standards.
Yeah, like this is the actual like impact topics and the requirements and the sub requirements, like we're calling this now the self-assessment. It's funny too that like step 4 is just like kind of like sprinkled in amongst the 14 steps, and like step 4 I think is easily the step that takes the absolute longest. This is like 6 months to like 3 years, you're working on the self-assessment. So
step 4 is a big step. And then this one, step 5 is sign the B Lab agreement. What is that? Is that different than how it works now? I feel like that's different.
I think is the thing of interdependence, is the declaration of interdependence the same? I think it's different. I
feel like you signed
like,
the B Lab agreement at the end in the current process.
Right. I think you're thinking of like, this is my certification certificate, and this is my declaration of interdependence. But I think the B Lab agreement is, we should know this, is like, oh, this is what verification. Are we calling it that? This is what
assurance.
The assurance looks like now. This is what the assurance process looks like. And this is where we all agree to be civil to each other and respect each other. And like, and also this is how it works, like the whole, and like you agree to like have these transparency things and like your B Corp profile. I think that's like, which is also helpful because I think a lot of people were getting to the verification part and being like still surprised by certain elements of being certified. So I think, yeah, that's also definitely a process improvement.
Yeah, I think what I was thinking of before is like before you submit your assessment on the older version of standards, you had to like click some boxes of like, check yes if you're attesting that this is your answers and blah, blah, blah. There was like a little dashboard you had to complete. But so, folks, just sign the agreement. Just sign it and move on. Let's go to step 6.
I bet you too, the agreement, we should know this. I'm so sorry. It's probably something also like, these are what your cert fees are going to be. And just like what you're saying is like, currently you
don't think about those things, Emmy. Just sign it.
We're also going to talk about
everything will be fine.
Everybody's on the edge of their seat.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably laying out the fees and the process, etc. Which gets us to step 6, assign assurance provider. What is an assurance provider, Emmy?
Yeah, B Lab is really driving this point home, which is like the verifiers are no longer B Lab employees. The verifiers they're independent of B Lab, and that is to ensure that there's like no conflict of interest and that all of the standards are being adhered to in the same way. But yeah, they really want to emphasize that like the verification process assurance happens with external companies. I think one of them is 2cert, and I'm not remembering
SCS.
the other one. Yes.
SCS Global.
Who are our assurance provider partners.
Yeah. So B Lab has 2 third-party assurance providers, like Emmy said. 2cert is I think it's a subsidiary of Ganeshatim, which has actually been the company doing some of the verification for B Lab over the past few years since the pandemic. If anyone's interested, we did an interview with Kaylee Gibson. I think it was December of 24 about getting behind the scenes on the B Corp verification process. So that's a little insider info there. And then SCS is a larger, well, actually, I don't know how large it is, but I know that it's focused. So SCS will be handling medium, large, extra large, extra large companies, and 2cert will be handling micro and small companies. And so that's how it's going to break out. Do you have any thoughts on that, Amy?
Yeah, if you have done research, as Ryan said, since the pandemic, it's somewhat likely that you have interacted with an independent verifier in some way, shape, or form. And so, yeah, it's going to be, I was going to say it's going to be a similar process, but It might be some similar people, but yeah, this is not 100% new. But what is new is that every single research now will be verified and assured independently.
Yeah. And this is definitely uncharted. I was not completely uncharted, but it's very less charted territory for B Lab, because in the past it was like, hey, this assurance provider or this independent auditor of our standards seems to have missed this or that thing. And then I'm going to talk to my contact at B Lab, and then maybe they'll help get it straightened out. But it was like B Lab could be sort of an ally or someone to help move things forward if you were feeling like stuck in the current verification process. But now this is like B Lab is explicitly not allowed. It's part of the whole ISO process that B Lab's going through for the European Commission, our European empowering consumers for the green transition European law. And so we really can't expect B Lab to just like come in, because that's the whole point, is they're not supposed to be able to. Although they have laid out several, like if there's a grievance or there are ways to file complaints about certain things, and it's TBD how that's going to go. But this is not the way that B Lab has traditionally done things, which is like tried to act on as an ally on behalf of the companies to say like, let's get more companies into the community and keep the process rigorous, but like be there if needed. Whereas this is like, hey, we literally can't.
Yeah. The idea is a certification should be unbiased and impartial. Like the standards should mean the same thing to everyone. And it's like also a sort of another level of transparency for the entire process, what that like stakeholders, consumers, investors can trust that like this means what it says it means.
Yeah. Okay. So one other thing that's of note for assurance providers is that it's not happening in 2026 because B Lab is going to be taking the payments from companies and then I think probably passing them to the assurance providers. But B Lab has mentioned that potentially in 2027 and beyond, companies will actually just pay the assurance providers, not even B Lab, for the assurance services, which is definitely a big change because companies are like, who am I paying this? Who's this check going to? So I'm not sure if you've heard any more information on that, Emmy, or is that about what you know as well?
That's news to me. I'm learning so much on this podcast episode. Yeah, I guess I had heard like pieces of it and didn't fully piece it together. But yeah, that is going to be quite an interesting process for sure. And that explains too why B Lab is trying to be so clear about these third-party verifiers and their names, so that there's some like there's less confusion when that time comes.
And I mean, something I'm watching, and there's been a lot of people who have said this before, and I know B Lab is aware of it, but I think it is worth reiterating that the quality of service from some of the independent verifiers has been mixed over the years, definitely a lot more mixed, really deep in the pandemic. I think it's gotten better, but still not like great. And so I'm really hoping that in this like training and skilling up and making it more of a formal process, that B Lab and 2Cert and SCS really like have really good people sort of that are interacting with the companies, and just making sure, because there's been times where it's like if the analyst doesn't understand a part of the assessment that the company's already gotten passed and gotten cleared in the past or things like that, it can be frustrating for the company to be like, hey, this analyst needs to get brought up to speed on like the things we've been doing, or So I'm hoping that the quality will be high, going forward with the assurance providers.
I think the thing to keep in mind is that we're all learning this together. And you bring up a great point. There should be feedback mechanisms to be able to communicate with the right folks, like what the quality of our experiences are like during these audits and these interactions. But yeah, I think just bringing patience and grace to some of these processes is going to be helpful for everyone.
Okay. Well, let's go to step 7 then. Prepare for the audit.
Yeah, this is a funny step because it's like, I guess maybe they'll outline some processes that you are like, this is maybe where you're actually uploading the documents or something like that. But I think the thing that's helpful to know is like, you will get an audit scheduled. Like, you will know in advance when your audit will be. I don't know how much in advance, but like, you will have time to prepare. The audit itself, step 8, the meat and potatoes, is apparently, it should not last more than 10 days, the whole thing said and done.
Yeah. Which is still pretty wild to me that would be 10 days.
Yeah, we're still averaging like 3 to 4 months for verification currently.
And it says audits may be on-site or remote, depending on the track of the company. It still seems incredibly unlikely for there to be a lot of on-site audits. Like, it just doesn't seem like they would have the capacity to do a bunch of on-sites.
This is interesting. This is an interesting question because, yeah, on-site reviews were more of a thing before the pandemic, and they never fully came back or got their groove type situation. I mean, I don't think they're that frequent because they're for larger companies, but, or at least in the past, now with the cadence being a little bit more frequent. Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of work to send folks to. I think they'll go to like HQs, and they also sometimes will select random sites to visit, and they often are doing employee interviews and all kinds of stuff. So it's quite an undertaking to do an on-site. But yeah, that's still not 100% clear. It will be clear to you if you have one, but we don't know sort of like at the larger scale.
Well, yeah, and it also says in the documents B Lab released that companies that are large, extra large, or double extra large will have on-site audits.
Yes. It's, and likely what, like year 0, 3, and 5, or every year?
I don't think it's every year.
Yeah. So I think that's how they're fitting it in, but it's still, it's quite an undertaking.
Like on-site worker interviews, facility walkthroughs, site sampling. I remember, okay, this is taking us back. When I was a solo practitioner at Honeyman Sustainability Consulting, this is probably like 2014 or 2013. I remember I got an audit that was like, I don't think it was on site because I didn't have an office, but I had to do like a full on, like, verify every question in my assessment. And I was like,
for Honeyman
solo practitioner.
That's really intense.
Yeah.
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
But we have had some clients do on-site audits over the years. And those are, yeah. I feel like it's very friendly audits, but those were run by B Lab. You never know.
I know. I should clarify too and say, like, on-site reviews in the past 5 years, they didn't like go away entirely. There's still companies that were selected for much more rigorous reviews, as Ryan is talking about here. And they would just do them remotely, but they would still be scheduling employee interviews and like require a lot of like imaging type proof of things. But yeah, it's going to be quite the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the components from the new release say certain companies like micro, small, or medium, especially if those companies are in services with minor footprint, wholesale, retail, are mostly going to be remote only unless there's a risk factor that triggers something. Companies without workers, remote only. And then, but it does say, yeah, like large, extra large, double XL, and then also agriculture, manufacturing, and services with significant footprint are more likely to have on-site audits, and some will require on-site. So
yeah, and that has been like pretty historically true too. It's quite parallel.
Sure. Okay, should we move to, so we've got this audit going on, and then step 9, issue corrective action and audit report. What is this about?
Okay, so this is interesting because I was at US CAN's Impact Collab today for foundation requirements, and some global folks ran through the assurance model. I don't remember who it was, but he spoke quite, I don't think the word is casually, but he was saying that it's like kind of inevitable that folks will have non-conformities. He was like, the standards are new, and like he really kind of made it seem, he didn't say specifically, but he made it seem like this is going to be a part of your cert process. And so I would like to take the time to be like, there is some flexibility here. Like if you're doing your work, if you're doing the work to like show your work wherever possible, and you can like give something to B Lab and like say like we've actually been working to do this, but it doesn't quite meet their specific way of doing it. There are opportunities to fix it, and I don't think it should be viewed as a bad thing.
And this is, I think, where it gets into, so 9 comes into number 10, which is addressing nonconformities, which is kind of what you're speaking to. Yeah. And I think there's major and minor nonconformities. I think Emmy spoke about this a little bit last time, but just an example of a minor might be a missing document for one policy, or a one-time lapse in safety training compliance, or inconsistent tracking of some piece of environmental data. Like you have it sometimes, and then 1 or 2 months you forget. Those are minor. Major is like human rights violations, like systemic health and safety hazards, like no safety equipment across your company, failure to implement required policies entirely. So it's like you maybe said you had a climate action plan, but then when they checked, you actually had no climate action plan, and we're just sort of saying you did. But also they said repeated minor nonconformities that were never fixed can become a major nonconformity.
That makes sense.
All right, so let's go to then step 11, which is make certification decision. Yeah, it says a positive certification decision can only be made if any major nonconformities have been closed within the assigned timeline. So I think the assurance provider will just tell you or us if you've made it, and then issue the certification is step 12 by the assurance provider.
Mm-hmm.
That's still crazy, though. The assurance provider issues the certification.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
That's valid for a period of 5 years, subject to the company undergoing surveillance and recertification audits. Wow.
My brain is still like trying to wrap around
Yeah.
it.
And I mean, I know that this is there for a reason, right? Like, I think the point, it's probably like an ISO compliance thing for European regulations or otherwise, but I imagine that B Lab cannot be the one issuing the certification, because then it would be them making this decision, and they don't want B Lab to be the one making that certification decision. They want it to be the assurance provider, which is separate.
Yeah.
Okay, so assurance provider So you get your certificate from TwoCert or SCS.
Yeah.
I also asked some folks at B Lab about this. I was like, okay, well, it sounds kind of like, for organic certification, you like, hey, we're organic certified by Oregon Tilth, or we're organic certified by blah, blah, blah. And so organic is the standard, but then Oregon Tilth is the assurance provider, I guess, in that scenario. And then they're the ones who issue the certification. So it's, I guess B Lab is moving towards that model.
Yes, and it will be interesting to see if folks cite who their assurance provider was, but the logo is going to be very specifically like that, the B Corp IP, which I think is step 13 issue license. That's what allows companies to use the B Corp logo.
Yeah. And what's wild too is I was thinking about this. If B Lab goes the way of organic certification, that means ultimately there could be more assurance providers.
Yes.
Right? Like there could be a
in the future
marketplace of assurance providers, and you could choose which one you want to work with.
Yeah, I will be really interested to see how it manifests. But yeah, I also am having a hard time reconciling. B Corp is different in a lot of ways from their certifications. Organic is a great example because there just isn't the community aspect of being organic certified. I mean, sure, there are gatherings and things like that for companies with organic certified products, but it's so I don't know, it's so formal now that it's difficult to put the two pieces together in my brain.
Yeah. And I mean, issue license, like you said, step 13, that's so now you not only have signed the B Lab agreement, which was back in step 5, but now in step 13, you're signing the B Lab license agreement, which is like the IP and things like that. This makes me think, Emmy, is pulling assurance out of B Lab actually going to affect B Lab's revenue model? Right? Because I don't know how much money they made or lost on assurance before verification. And so it's how does this, I bet this is I don't know which way this is affecting B Lab. I imagine it's probably, they might have to reduce the amount of staff they have or something potentially because they used to have all these in-house verifiers that are now getting outsourced. And so, just occurred to me.
Yes. But it is a huge change in the funding model for B Lab, and it's no small sacrifice, that's for sure, to preserve the integrity of the certification and what the B Corp logo means. I think this is also an interesting time to talk about the B Corp logo because it is changing. I actually haven't seen it. It's got a website in it now, and I do just want to give folks the heads up wherever possible that it is bigger and apparently more difficult to fit on packaging, as some of my clients have cited. So watch out for that. And also, if you got some print runs coming up, think about that.
Yeah. Well, definitely if you're going to be affected by the ECGT law, then you have to have the new logo to sell in Europe. And and I know B Lab is talking about in January 26, a new B Corp brand book will be published. So that they'll probably have some stuff on that. But maybe before we jump into that, why don't we just talk about step 14, bringing it on home, conducting year 3 surveillance and recertification audits.
Yeah. In this B Corp cert process requirements doc. Appendix A gives us this audit frequency chart, which is really helpful. So it lays out by company size, sort of like how frequently your company will get audited for B Corp certification. For micro, small, and medium companies, you'll do your year zero certification during year zero. And then for the first year after that, you don't have to do what they call a surveillance audit. And from what I understand, the surveillance audit is like a much more abbreviated version of like a full cert audit. I couldn't tell you precisely what that looks like. I will say back to the sort of major nonconformities and minor nonconformities. Oh my goodness, what a mouthful. The surveillance audits are where you would sort of get the assurance providers checking in on whether you have remedied some of your minor nonconformities. If you're a large, extra large company, you're going to do the full cert for year zero. You have a surveillance audit in the following 2 years, and then you'll do a full year 3 cert audit. You'll do another surveillance audit the year after that, and then for year 5, you'll do a full audit again.
Yeah. So this is actually more. It's
oh my gosh.
It's more.
Sorry. I just wanted to clarify. This is my bad, everybody. I'm so sorry. This table I just read out was for companies in agriculture, service with significant footprint, and manufacturing sectors, which is going to be a little bit more rigorous than for wholesale retail and services with minor footprints. Sorry.
Well, pretty much they're the same. It's just they're the same frequency. It's just the ones in agriculture, service with significant manufacturing have a little more burdensome audits. So there's like annual audits, and 2 are on site and things like that. So yeah, it's just the frequency is the same. It's just more of the sort of burden of the audit. But what I was saying is that this is more. I mean, one of the critiques of B Corp certification, you could say before, is like, hey, if you get certified as a B Corp, you don't have to think about it for another couple of years. And this is really testing that. I mean, if you're a micro company, if you're 1 to 9 employees, you have year 0, but then you have 2 years off, and then you have a year 3. So there definitely is less for smaller companies. But if you are large, extra large, double extra large, you're getting audited every year pretty much. And the extent of that is TBD. We don't know what surveillance necessarily means.
Right. Yeah, and I'll say too, like, a lot of B Corps really struggled with like being really surprised by new stuff every 3 years because they wouldn't look at it for 3 years. And so I think this forces companies to make B Corp a much more regular part of their operations and for it to be much more of an annual process that ideally you're not necessarily like doing a lot of preparing for. Like once you get up to speed and you're fulfilling a lot of the requirements, I think the idea is that it shouldn't take as much time because you just have everything ready and handy and you're sort of adding things here and there as years go by. But yeah, it's definitely a lot more for sure.
Yeah. And just to answer my own question about surveillance audits are periodic partial evaluations conducted between certification cycles to ensure continued conformity with the B Lab standards requirements. And so that's still a little bit vague, but it does say, for example, a pre-audit action for a company that's approaching a surveillance audit would be review and update the self-assessment, report changes to the certification scope, total number of workers, and revenue, review and update brands. And then that's just what you have to do beforehand. And then I imagine, this is speculation, but I imagine they're spot checking similar to what B Lab may do now on some level of like, okay, you say you do this, prove it. You say you do that, prove it. So companies will be kept on their toes through these surveillance audits.
Indeed. I will also say, I think what I'm seeing a large difference between the current process and the future process is that our reviews, our verifications are longer because there's more of a back and forth. And it sounds like there will be a lot less of that, or at least the timeline would be technically stretched out for that. And so it's like you submit your documents, they determine you don't really have what you need, and then you have until your next audit to fix it, or you have 6 months to fix it, where you'll submit your documents again, and then you'll just like have a certain amount of time to fix it type situation.
Yep. A few other just things to note. Let's talk briefly pricing. Like, what are we talking about when we say pricing updates? So B Lab has, this is US, Canada. And so I imagine it's similar in other parts of the world, but at least for US, Canada, it's a roughly 5% increase for 2026, which, you know, it's never fun when the fees go up, but you have to, I mean, I have to admit that there's been a ton of work that B Lab has had to put in, you know, to work on these standards over many years. And then a 5% increase seems pretty manageable. But for example, if you're 0 to 5 million in revenue, the certification fee is $2,100 per year. If you're something like 10 million in revenue, it's almost 4,000. 20 million in revenue is about 9,000. 50 million in revenue is 16,800. 100 million in revenue is about 26,000. And then it kind of scales all the way up to 750 million in revenues, 47,000. And then if you're over $1 billion, contact us. It says contact us.
Then that's US dollars, and that's for US CAN pricing.
Well, it actually says your local currency, US dollars or Canadian dollars.
Oh, interesting. Fascinating. Okay. And yeah, those numbers invariably bring up the what am I getting out of my certification? And I think, yeah, there's so much time and effort going into this, but I think it's easy to forget that we're paying for accountability and transparency and the integrity of the B Corp logo. But it's also the time when we say like, oh, if you feel like you're not getting a ton out of your B Corp certification, it's also the time to ask the question, like, how much are you putting in to your B Corp certification? So it's unfortunately not one of those things that you can just do every 3 years now and not think about it in between. Like, I think folks really got to start working it in to their day-to-day.
Yeah. We should touch on a few other highlights. B Lab has created an examples of evidence folder on the knowledge base, which is a library of evidence examples created per impact topic to guide you in gathering the necessary documentation for the new sub-requirements. So you can check that out on the Certification Hub page.
I will just say really quickly on that, for the evidence knowledge base articles, they're really helpful for visualizing or like thinking like, what is this? What am I actually uploading? What is the thing I'm going to submit to determine whether I fulfill this sub requirement? But there still is a bit of back and forth between the knowledge base and the B Impact platform. Within this like specific sub requirement are like a bunch of resources like implementation resources and further guidance that it still requires a little bit of back and forth to be able to get a good idea of what they're looking for.
There's online courses. So if you really want to learn about the assurance model and the end-to-end certification process and the role of B Lab and the assurance providers, it's actually a pretty helpful little video that's free. And there's also other online courses.
I have not looked at it.
You haven't watched it?
It's on my list.
Yeah.
There's so many videos. There's so many courses. I think there's courses from global and there's some materials from US Can too, I think, or sometimes from the global partners.
A couple other things to keep an eye out for, like we said, the January of 26, a new B Corp brand book will be published with brand guidelines. January 29th, there'll be a global webinar on the new certification process. So, register for that. February 1 is when B Lab will start accepting certification submissions for audit on V2.1 for existing B Corps. And then March is the opening up for new B Corps. Anything to add on those, Emmy?
Just the forever reminder, if that you're subject ECGT laws, that B Lab is encouraging folks to submit, existing B Corps to submit as soon as possible.
Which is February 1, which we thought was going to be January 1, but it's February 1 now. Okay, well, I think that about wraps up. Anything else to add, Emmy, before we sign off for today?
I think I have I want to say, like, I have been feeling very overwhelmed by the sheer level of information that we've been getting over the course of the year. But then I also have been thinking about how we've come very far in the past 3 years. Like, it's just truly incredible what B Lab has put into this, what the community has put into this. And like, we're really close to being able to like see the effects and like where the rubber meets the road. And if you're feeling really overwhelmed, like, please don't be too hard on yourself. Like, it is a little bit overwhelming, but if you are overwhelmed, please, I just, like, if you haven't logged into your B Impact platform, please do that, because you could just get to see your year zero requirements as a company who is B Corp certified, or I guess for new companies as well. You only in the Impact platform see your year zero requirements. And I think that makes a lot of things just like significantly more approachable. And you can start like breaking things down. But please, if you haven't looked,
look, people,
please look. Just it's the
it.
same URL. Like, what is it actually? It's just bookmarked in my thing. What is it? app.bcorporation.net. Now it is. That actually would explain why my browser has a hard time loading this every time, because I have the other one.
Oh, you have the other one saved. Yeah.
app.bcorporation.net. That's really straightforward.
That's straightforward. Okay, well, thanks everyone for listening. Emmy and I may have answered some of our own questions, may have raised more questions than we know how to answer, but we are on this journey with you, trying to make our way through the darkness to the light.
Indeed.
Okay. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye. Hey, Beyond the Bee listeners. If you're looking for even more inspiring conversations with leaders on the front lines of our movement towards just futures, be sure to subscribe to Next Economy Now, produced by the team at Lift Economy. Next Economy Now broadens the focus beyond the B Corp movement to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, democratic, equitable, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. Check out our latest episodes at lifteconomy.com/podcast. You can subscribe to Next Economy Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.